Aloha. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about leadership. This is deeply personal for me because what if leadership isn't a title, but it's a test for who you are in the worst of times when everything is stacked against you? That's how I had to learn my leadership. What about you? Before I went to West Point, our day, where I'm standing outside. I'm in civilian clothes. I had cut my hair. I had long hair in high school, and I cut it about a week before I started West Point. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. I knew it was going to be tough, but I didn't realize how tough. I didn't realize how tough. I didn't start off saying, "Oh, I'm going to West Point because I want to be a leader." That wasn't it. I just wanted to be tested. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do in my career. Maybe some of you can relate to that when you're going off to college, if you can call that a college. The women were told early on that we don't belong there, that we shouldn't be there, that we aren't leaders, and that we can't handle the stress. So, yeah. So that's how I started, kind of at a disadvantage in that respect. Although I will say first day was pretty professional. The summer tested us so much physically. Oh my gosh, it was tough. And I was very blessed that in my second detail, I had this great commander, James Fitch, really inspiring and helped me see a great example of leadership. Still, I wanted to look forward to the academic year when I wasn't having to worry about running every morning. Not my specialty, although I did make it. All of us get tested in some way. And when I started the academic year, it was anything but. I didn't realize we would be outnumbered by the upper class. Makes sense, right? 3-1. But I will say I got in trouble. I was in trouble a lot. Day one was a misunderstanding that turned into something. Our new commander was so angry at me. He told me he'd never been more angry at anyone in his life when he was with me for complete misunderstanding, having visitors because I knew people before. And there were times, especially in the summer, that they kept separating the women from the men to talk to us. It put us at a huge disadvantage. When you do single people out, you have to be very sensitive to, is that now making it worse? One time they separated us in the summer where it was getting dark and all the guys were able to put up their pup tents and get their food, and we were talking. By the time we could get to our tents, we didn't have flashlights. We had to put together what we could in the time that we had, and it was pretty miserable. So the women largely resented every time they tried to pull us into a separate group to talk to us. I don't need to do that stinking stuff. I just want to be with the guys. Yes, even our voices changed. I have a pretty low pitch. Roger Love, the voice coach, has told me you need to bring it up because happiness isn't in this low time where I can go really low. And I can yell pretty well. I won't do it here. Roger Love tells me that happiness resides in those upper pitches. So let me see if I can do that. The other thing was, it was very clear early on. There'd be some that looked great, and we thought, oh, they're great leaders. But they weren't. They looked the part, but they were terrible. And then there were others who were very overlooked, and they were simply amazing. They were a great leader, caring, sensitive, paying attention, giving us what we needed to be successful. I was grateful early on in my military career. I came across my platoon sergeant, not the first one. The first one was for a couple months. I don't really call him my platoon sergeant because he was an engineer, he was signal, and his standards, let's just say, he looked the part. He spoke the part, very well spoken. But his standards, he was cheating on his wife. He didn't know what he was doing, but he did it with authority. The soldiers were paying attention to him, and it was a mess. Really was a mess. He never showed up in the times when I really needed him. He didn't check on my troops. And then came Sergeant Scott, Sergeant James O. Scott. We had a big battle initially because he actually did come on board to check with my people, and they came running to me telling me all kinds of stories about him. Oh, he's trying to countermand your orders, ma'am, and da da da, all this stuff before I even met him. So in the first formation he showed up, I was pretty grumpy. Not the greatest leader. I said, Sergeant Scott, I need you to meet me in my office after formation. He's thinking, oh my God, this woman hates me. What's going on? Lucky for me, after I read him the riot act, because I didn't ask questions, I learned that later, and I told him, I said, look, Sergeant Scott, I am the platoon leader. You are the platoon sergeant. When I give orders, I need you to follow them, and if you can't, I will find you another place. That's essentially what I said to him. Thank God for me that in my case, he looked at that as a challenge and he stayed with me. He became the best example of any leader you could ever hope to work with and to help train me to be the leader that I could be. He was just amazing. In fact, I wrote a chapter, The Mentor That Matters, on him. Sadly, he was taken away too early. Leadership isn't about shouting. Some people, I've asked them, what do you think leadership is? It's about giving orders. No, it's not. Yes, you might be doing that, but it's not who can shout the loudest. It's not looking the best in the uniform. It's about having character, empathy, understanding, consistency, checking with the people. I saw firsthand the damage done by leaders who were terrible examples, who belittled, ignored, or jumped to conclusions, negative conclusions, then did everything that follows after that on terrible information. It was very discouraging at times and could be, but that's not who I was. I luckily got trained by the best and I wasn't about to give up. I also saw the magic. When you're in a leadership position, I saw the magic of those who were amazing leaders. They made their people better. They made the mission better just by being who they are and believing in the others. So that was a huge, huge insight. I had mostly terrible leaders. So those of you who are in jobs and you don't appreciate your leadership, I'll tell you, sadly, that's where I learned the most lessons. So you want to stick with it until you learn the lesson, because if you don't learn the lesson, it will be repeated later, or you might suffer with it. One of the big lessons I learned that still guides me today is, one is how context matters. Context is so important. Stop judging people on appearances. Make sure you dig deeper, you see deeper, you ask those questions. The way that I ask a question is you assume the best and ask your questions accordingly. I was lucky. I had one leader who everybody was afraid to meet with because he would bring rain on them. When they heard that I had to go report to them, they're like, oh my gosh, you could hear all the chatter. I went into him and he asked me a question about a situation. He said, well, could you please explain what happened? And I explained to him from my perspective what had happened. And he said, okay, thanks. He let me go. And everyone was like, oh, you had your ass chewed. No, he was wonderful. He was wonderful. That's one of those moments where you just say, thank you, thank you that I finally had that great leader who was going to help me instead of not helping me. Another thing is, I didn't realize I was an empath, but I am very keenly aware of vibration. I could develop connections very quickly, very deeply with most people because most people are suffering from something. The ability to go in, I didn't realize it was a strength, but it really is a strength because you can't understand how many ways that people are being tested. And I was always astounded with how they were able to function at all with all that was going on in their lives. Empathy for me became a really huge, huge strength. Leadership, it's earned daily. It's not something it's a one and done. You have to earn it daily. And oh, by the way, here's a big tip. Everyone's a leader. You don't think you're a leader? You're showing leadership to somebody. Act accordingly. Don't be that bad example for the little ones or the older ones, or do the thing that's popular that hurts people. No, leadership is earned daily. It's not a position. It's your choices. It's your tone. It's the loving place that you come from. It's love in action. I will say, sometimes you'll be super tested. I went into a job where you can imagine you have people who support you as a commander. They're supposed to provide information to you. They're supposed to receive people coming in. They're supposed to support you. I came outside one time and two people, one who was supposed to support me as the number one, but I figured the number two person's supposed to support me if the number one's not available, who was on the phone. And the number two, who was in the front office, looking like a beaten dog, as though, no, don't ask me to do anything. You need to go to your person. I'm like, she's not available. I need this done right now. What, isn't that a reasonable request? It was anything but. I actually did the copying of the document I needed. I said, I'll just do it myself. And then I walked into my room and I was reverberating from all that toxic energy. I found out that they'd hated each other. They'd sat across from each other for 12 years and they'd hated each other. And everybody was telling me, you need to fire them both. You need to just get rid of them, or you need to fire one. I'm like, no, we're going to figure this out. And Doug Krug, some of you heard me talk about him. His Enlightened Leadership book gives you examples of how to bring out the best and work with them. I had two people work with these two women. And I said, you've got 3 meetings with them to work this out. And I know it may not work out, but we're going to try. We're going to do our best because it's really important to try. I had someone scream at me one time, you should have just fired them. It took 30 days to undo 12 years of horrible dynamics in the front office. If I didn't have a front office that shared my values, what kind of signal do you send your organization? The 2 people that I selected to work with them were top notch, just wonderful, wonderful people. I want to say amazing all the time, but they really were. They were someone you would want to work with anytime, any day. One was from my HR department and one was my executive assistant at the time. They went into their first meeting and they came out and my executive assistant told me, ma'am, this may not work. I said, go back in there. We got some standards, lay out the standards. We need this to happen. I had some pretty clear standards. You need to greet people when they come into the office. You don't need to wait for them to say hello first. You need to make them feel welcome so they will share whatever that issue is. We might be able to find out even more if you're nice to them. You would think that would be part of the process, but when I gave them that DISC test, I found out they were what they call passive, what I call thoughtful, and they didn't want to deal with anybody. Everybody had to say something first. They weren't going to say it. So I had to give them guidance and put it in their evaluation job description so that they would do it. Anyway, we go on, and you can imagine after the second time, I actually had Doug Krug working with my organization, and he interviewed both of them. He came out and he said, you know, Deb, I don't think this is going to work. And I said, you can't tell me that. You wrote the book Enlightened Leadership. And so he went back in and he talked to the second one. And he came out and he said, oh my God. He said, I'm not sure this is going to work. I said, okay, thank you, but I believed you. This can work. We can bring out the best in people. We can ask our questions in ways that bring them to their own understanding of why it's in their interest to do it. Not because I tell them to, but because it's in their interest, because that's the only reason people will change. I found out that it had to be a high standard. So the third time I said, look, you've got one more time to go in there to talk with them, but they have to understand neither of them will stay in the front office if they can't work it out. And when they leave, I won't demote them. They'll get paid, but they're going to work in other parts of the organization, even though I know how valuable they are to this organization in the front office. Because each of them had great talent and understanding of what the job entailed and had seen 5 commanders. I wanted to make sure that if we could keep them, it would be great to do that. Well, my guys went back in to talk to them, and guess what? It worked. Now, I can't tell you that it was a dream, but it worked. They understood. They stopped crying. They stopped sending emails to each of us to tell us about what the other one was doing. There were a whole bunch of standards that went into it, but that's setting a high standard. I shared the high performance team model that I created. Attitude, behavior, standards. Most of the time, people have a great attitude of themselves, and their behaviors don't necessarily match it. Definitely, it's the standards that are really lacking because they're just not doing it. And that's what it was with these two. So that is one of the examples. We want to build each other up. We want to earn it daily, the leadership. Our words matter. If I say something, then I need to follow through. But it's also about encouraging them as a leader. I don't even subscribe to criticism. I would normally go to my commanders in Iraq and I would say, your job's hard enough. What's one thing that I can do for you that would make your job easier to get it done? And they would have it. They'd know it. I would work as hard as I could with my people, the rest of my people, in order to give it to them. So those words matter. And I don't criticize. You can ask a question in a way without having to go there. Even if it's not where you want it, you have to understand the psychology and the understanding of what makes people do things. It's for their own reasons. If I yelled at you on this talk, how long would you remember that? Now, some people say a minute. I don't remember it, but I'll tell you, the majority is a lifetime. I may never get that chance again to connect and to support you. So I want to make sure I'm very careful not to be around people if I'm in that mode, because sometimes we go there. The final piece of that is leaders bring out our best and build each other up, starting with themselves. They're always learning how to be a better leader. What can we do to improve things? How can we make it easier to make better choices? We think of leadership as being separate from love or life, but it's not. The truth is, they're inseparable. The best leaders understand this. They love their people. I love the people I worked with. There were some who were prickly and I had a challenge, but it wasn't for lack of trying. People were trying. And you never stop learning better ways to bring out the best in other people. Here's my challenge. Where are you called to lead? I see Coney has asked a question. So where are you being called to lead? I see Tony's being called to lead in some area. He doesn't really want to. Where can you listen better? Love deeper, which is right up your alley, Tony. And lead with your whole heart. Always start there. Because when leadership is done right, it's not about power. It's about possibility. It's about working with others and having that possibility. As I mentioned, I didn't want to be in a leadership position until I was being told if that person got the leadership job, I'd have to work for them. And I didn't want to work for them, that kind of leader. Once I started going into leadership positions, I mean, truly leadership positions in our battalions, which were in the military, I learned that I could create the environment. That's what you do. It's not about you doing, but it is about you creating the environment for others to succeed. I hope that helps, Tony. I want you to think about this acronym. I want to finish up with that. The core of real leadership. I've got an acronym for you. You're going to love it. D. It's 3 letters. Dig deeper than the surface. Because you can't be fooled by appearances. You go pick up a piece of meat and you see it in the store. Do they show you the worst part of the meat? No. That's like every problem I was given. They show you their part, what they see, and then you open it up and it's like, oh, look at all the stuff that's inside there. So don't be fooled about appearances. Neither is leadership about polish. It's about principle. Look beyond the resume. Look for character. Look for consistency. Look for contribution. But dig beneath and ask better questions. I already had a talk on questions. You want to ask the better questions that bring out their best and understanding for the situation you face. The E is empathy. And I talked about that. It's an essential leadership trait. People are being tested all the time. It's not just a matter of you want to go from A to B. Success is never a straight line that I've discovered. It's always zigzag. You got to go from here, here, and sometimes it's a trap door, and you got to get out of that trap door in order to get something done. But when you have empathy, and what I mean by that is that you're very sensitive because you're asking questions of the people who you work with to make sure that they're in a good place and that they're getting all the support that they need. If there's something that you need, you're very clear on what that is to other people and why it's important. When it's done right, you're building trust with each other. When you have that trust, you're building dream teams. That's what I love to build. I love to build dream teams. Okay, so I got a D, I got an E. Can anyone guess what the next letter is? B. Build others up. Think about it. We've talked about it. Real leaders don't just shine. They ignite the light in others, and they work so hard to model that. They have humility. It's not about boasting. It's not about getting positive feedback from others, which is nice, but it's not essential. You do what's right in the right way, not as righteous, but in what's the best path. And it's always undergirded by love. You encourage and you make sure that people understand that serving others is the highest level of connection that we can have in making our world better. And knowing that the greatest strength that we can do is help build others up, not tear them down, but build them up. Or at least if they're misguided, which I will talk about, sometimes they go in a direction we don't want. It takes everybody to make a better world for each of us. And finally, leadership done right, it's not about power, it's about possibility. So thank you for joining me. Aloha.